Shabbos Daf Memhei continues the discussion about muktzah and the machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon on the subject. Muktzah again means that an object is functionless on Shabbos and therefore it is forbidden to use and forbidden to move. And there are many machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon on the concept, but Rabbi Shimon generally takes a lenient view and Rabbi Yehuda takes a strict view. This daf will discuss the opinion of Rabbi Shimon more at length. The Gemara will come up with a number of different potential reasons in which something may be considered functionless and ask, does Rabbi Shimon agree that it's functionless and it's muktzah? Or does Rabbi Shimon hold that no, even that type of muktzah is not muktzah? Amongst the types we will see are muktzah machmas mitzvah, meaning something which you do not usually intend to use on Shabbos because it's set aside for a mitzvah. We have something which is asur, that's what we were discussing yesterday, a burning candle which you can't move because it may go out. What happens when that candle does go out? Can you then move the lamp that it was in? We will also have the concept of dechiyah b'yadayim, where you set something aside from being muktzah. You set something aside from being useful. You put it in a place where it can't be used. Does Rabbi Shimon agree to that? We'll also have the concept of food, which cannot be eaten because it's in a spoiled or unripe state. That's really useless. Does Rabbi Shimon agree that that's muktzah? While we are discussing this, we'll also try to ascertain the opinions of several different Amoraim as to whether or not they agree to Rabbi Shimon or to Rabbi Yehuda. We'll start off the daf discussing the opinion of Rav, and then later, after introducing all these types of muktzah, we will discuss the opinion of Rebbe and the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan as we try to get to Psak Halacha in these issues. So we are in the middle of a discussion as to the machlokes between Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda about a burning candle. While it's burning, it's definitely muktzah. The question is, what happens when it goes out? Rabbi Yehuda says, listen, if it was muktzah in the beginning of Shabbos, it's muktzah the whole Shabbos. Even if the candle then goes out, you don't have to worry about putting it out by moving it. Rabbi Shimon says, no. Once the candle goes out, you can move it, no problem anymore. Now the Gemara had said at the end of the daf yesterday that Rav agrees to Rabbi Yehuda. Now the Gemara says, I'm going to prove to you that Rav agrees to Rabbi Yehuda. So the Gemara says we have a proof that Rav agrees to Rabbi Yehuda that a burning candle remains muktzah even after the candle has gone out because of the following statement. Rav says about putting a candle down on a tree before Shabbos or Yontif. Now the issue is as follows. You're not allowed to take the candle off the tree on Shabbos or Yontif. That would be a potential gzeira. That's gzeira, I mean, you can't take things on or off a tree. Now, Rav says you can put the candle on the tree before Shabbos, you can't put the candle on the tree before Yontif. Now, it's obvious that the reason why you're allowed to put it there before Shabbos is because you'll never come to take it off, because it's muktzah even when it goes out. On Yontif, candles aren't muktzah. There's no issue of muktzah with candles at all. You're allowed to move them. So that's why Rav says you can't put the candle on the tree before Yontif, because people may come to take the candle off the tree on Yontif once the candle goes out, because it's not muktzah. But on Shabbos, where the candle is muktzah, Rav says you don't have to worry about people coming to take the candle off the tree after it has gone out, because it's muktzah. Obviously, Rav holds like Rabbi Yehuda, and that's why he says that on Shabbos you will not come to take the candle off the tree because it's muktzah. If he held like Rabbi Shimon, it wouldn't be muktzah neither on Yontif nor on Shabbos. Why should there be a difference between Yontif and Shabbos? So you see that Rav agrees to Rabbi Yehuda. Now the Gemara says, hold on a second, I have a proof that Rav agrees to Rabbi Shimon. And that's because Rav was once asked, what about your Hanukkah candles when they go out? You're allowed to move them if you're worried that a certain group of people called the Chavri, that they attack, they don't allow Jews to light Hanukkah candles or to light any candles. So you're allowed to move your Hanukkah menorah indoors on Shabbos after the menorah has gone out. So Rav said yes. So how could he say that you're allowed to move it indoors? According to Rabbi Yehuda, it should be muktzah after it's gone out. It stays muktzah because it was muktzah when Shabbos began. So Gemara says, well, this is different. This is a situation where people are afraid. There is an element of danger involved. That's why Rav says you're allowed to rely on Rav Shimon in this situation. And now the Gemara tries a number of different examples to see how far Rav Shimon goes with his lenient opinion in Hilchos Muktzah. We know that a totally functionless object is muktzah, even according to Rabbi Shimon. He just holds that an object which has a function that you can't use, he's very lenient in considering it to be functional. The question is, what about a situation where you took a functional object and you made it non-functional. With your hands, you pushed it away from its functional use. The two examples would be if you took grain, which is functional, it's food, and you planted it. Well, that obviously you're not planning on eating it anymore. Or you took an egg, which could be functional, it's food, and then you stuck it under a chicken that it should incubate. Obviously, again, you're planning on having it grow to hatch, you're not planning on eating it. So does that mean that it's no longer food and therefore it's now considered functionless, and Reb Shimon agrees that it's muktzah? So Gemara says no. Reb Shimon says that's not muktzah. The only thing Reb Shimon says is muktzah, the only functional object that Reb Shimon says is muktzah is a candle which is burning because you're afraid you're going to put the fire out, and because it is a mitzvah of Ner Shabbos, you can't use it for anything else because it's set aside for the muktzah and for the mitzvah and because of the Isser. Gemara says, why do you need both? Either one should be enough. It should be enough the fact that it's set aside for the mitzvah. You shouldn't also need the fact that you may put the candle out and it's an Isser. And the Gemara now proceeds to prove that Rabbi Shimon holds that something which is set aside for a mitzvah remains muktzah. You can't use it for something else. The Gemara brings two brises that discuss this. One of them refers to the decorations we hang in a sukkah. The brisa says if you hung up in your sukkah colored cloths and sheets with designs on it, or nuts, peaches, almonds, pomegranates, clusters of grapes, stalks of wheat, bottles of fragrant wine, flower baskets, all these things you hung in your sukkah, so you're not allowed to use it the entire sukkah, even Chol Hamoed, because it's set aside for its mitzvah, and therefore it is not intended to be useful. Unless when you hung it up you made a condition that you're allowed to use them on Yontif, then you didn't set it aside. Now, this might not be Reb Shimon, so the Gemara has another brisa which says if you have wood which is near a sukkah, so you're allowed to use it. It's not necessarily part of the sukkah. But if you have wood which is part of a sukkah, this is referring to the sukkah of Sukkot, not just any hut, so then you are not allowed to use it. Even Rabbi Shimon agrees that that's set aside for the mitzvah, and therefore you can't use it. So you see here clearly that Rabbi Shimon does agree that something which is set aside for a mitzvah, be it sukkah or sukkah decorations, that you can't use it. So back to our question therefore is, why do we say that Rabbi Shimon says that the candle which is lit for Shabbos is not usable because it's an Isser, it may go out, and because it's a mitzvah? Just the reason of mitzvah should be enough. And so the Mishnah says, yes, that's what I meant. When I said Isser and mitzvah, I meant mitzvah. The only thing is that the mitzvah is limited to the Isser. As long as it's concerned that the fire might go out, you have to set it aside for its mitzvah. Once the fire goes out, the mitzvah has ended, and therefore you're allowed to use it from henceforth onward. Now the Gemara discusses another type of muktzah that Rosh Hashanah agrees to, and that is food which becomes inedible. Now, when you set out fruits to dry, so raisins and dried figs, raisins are dried grapes, so dried grapes and dried figs, the drying process is that you spread them out on the roof, and when they begin to dry, they become totally spoiled and ruined. You can't eat them anymore, and after a while, they dry all the way to the raisin or dried fig state, and then you can't eat them. In between, they are not edible. However, other types of dried fruits, such as peaches and quinces and other things, are edible throughout the drying process. So the Gemara says the only food that Reb Shimon says is useless, and you cannot use on Shabbos that they're muktzah, is grapes and figs that you set out to dry, because they become spoiled, they become useless. So the Gemara says, hold on a second, we have a brisa that says that somebody's in the middle of eating, and he stops, and he takes what's left over, and he puts it up on the roof to dry. So that's muktzah, unless he specifically had in mind to eat them on Shabbos. Now, what type of fruit? So the brisa says, grapes, figs, peaches, quinces, and other fruits. So you see clearly that this rule that while it's set out to dry, it's useless and it's muktzah, is not only by grapes and figs. It applies grapes and figs which become spoiled while they're drying. It applies even to other food which aren't spoiled while they're drying. The fact that they're being set aside, they're being set on the roof to dry, means you don't intend to eat them, so you consider them functionless on Shabbos. Now the Gemara says, well, how do you know that this is Reb Shimon, this brisa about the peaches and the quinces? Maybe it's Rabbi Yehuda. So the Gemara says it can't, because Rabbi Yehuda says that you do not have to set something aside with your hands from use. You don't have to make it useless with your hands by setting it away from use in order for it to be muktzah. Even something that you just happen to not generally use, like something in a storage room or something, is muktzah. You don't have to actually set it out. So why would this brisa would not be a chiddush? Here, you're even setting it aside to dry. So Rabbi Yehuda would certainly say so. It wouldn't be a chiddush according to Rabbi Yehuda. Someone says, no, really it is Rabbi Yehuda. You're asking me it's not a chiddush because Rabbi Yehuda holds it's a muktzah even if you didn't set it aside, and here you set it aside to dry. So the chiddush here is that the guy was in the middle of eating it, and you may think since he was in the middle of eating it, it's automatic that he intends to continue eating it, even though he set it aside. He was in the middle of eating it. So the state of being in the middle of eating it continues. So the chiddush is no. If you stopped and you set it aside, the fact that you're in the middle of eating it doesn't count any longer. Now, the Gemara now has a question about another type of unripe food, which may be muktzah according to Rabbi Shimon, and this will take us into discussion as to what Rebbe holds. So the question was that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi's son, he had a son named Shimon. This should not be confused with Rabbi Shimon, who is the one whose shita we are discussing here. But Shimon, the son of Rebbe, asked his father, what does the Rabbi Shimon hold about unripe dates? Now these are generally picked before they ripen, and they're set aside in a special type of container where they'll continue to ripen. So these are slightly different. These were never ripe. It's not like the grapes and the figs that they were edible before you set them aside. They were never in a fit to eat state. They will ripen as things go along. If they ripen on Shabbos, can they be edible now? Are they not muktzah now? Or do we say that since they began Shabbos unripe, they will stay muktzah the entire Shabbos according to Rabbi Shimon? So the Gemara says no. Rabbi answered no. Rabbi Shimon would say that they are not muktzah, because the only thing which is muktzah is if you took the fruit and you set it aside to dry and you actively made it useless on Shabbos, you made it muktzah. So now the Gemara says, hold on a second. The fact that Rabbi Shimon asked his father this question seems to indicate that they both hold like Rabbi Shimon. But I could prove to you that they don't hold like Rabbi Shimon, that they hold like Rabbi Yehuda. And that's from the following brisa. The brisa says that although you're allowed to slaughter animals, you're allowed to shecht on Yontif because you need the animals to eat. But animals which were not intended, they were not set for slaughter on the beginning of Yontif remain muktzah the entire Yontif, and therefore you cannot shecht them on Yontif. Now, this is obviously the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yehuda is the one who says that something which begins Yontif or Shabbos muktzah stays muktzah the entire time. Rabbi Shimon wouldn't hold that way. Now, in this brisa, Rebbe himself, who was the one who answered the question before, he says something, because the question here is, how do you define the brisa continues and says, how do you define animals which are not intended for slaughter on Yontif? And the answer is range animals that generally wander and graze far from the farms, far from the village, as opposed to those which are close, near, they're in the yard, they're in the barn. So the question is, how do you define far out animals? How do you define animals that are considered to be far ranging animals that the owner never considered slaughtering them at the beginning of Yontif and therefore they were muktzah? So Rebbe gets involved in that discussion. So what we have, that as far as defining close animals, which certainly the owner has in mind that he may want to shecht, those are any animal which comes home to sleep for the night, every night. What about animals that don't come home for the night? So the Tanna Kama says if they come home on Pesach and in Cheshvan, so if that's the only time they come home, then they're considered wild, and therefore the owner cannot have in mind that he wanted to shecht those. Rebbe, however, says no, those are not considered wild. Wild is only if they never come home at all, unless you go and you fetch them. So Rebbe is clearly going with this opinion, which is clearly Rabbi Yehuda. So how could we seem to indicate that he was discussing this whole shayla as to what Rabbi Shimon holds, which seems to indicate that he holds like Rabbi Shimon? So the Gemara gives three answers. The Gemara first says, first of all, that even Rabbi Shimon would agree that animals which you sent away into the fields, you pushed away, it's considered to be like food that you put up on the roof to dry. You sent it away, it's obviously not meant to be eaten on this Yontif. Even Rabbi Shimon would agree that it stays muktzah. You can't go and fetch it and shecht it. That's one thing. Second answer is that maybe Rabbi himself was just answering the question as to what Rabbi Shimon holds. It doesn't mean he holds like Rabbi Shimon. Or on the other hand, maybe the opposite. Maybe Rabbi really holds like Rabbi Shimon, but he doesn't hold like Rabbi Yehuda. But in this brisa, he's just getting involved in how you define, how Rabbi Yehuda's opinion would define close by animals and far ranging animals. Okay, now the Gemara switches gears slightly after having discussed what Rebbe holds in this machlokes Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. The Gemara now wants to know what does Rabbi Yochanan hold. So the Gemara has a few different reports from various different Amoraim as to what Rabbi Yochanan, who lived in Eretz Yisrael, what did he hold about this machlokes? So first the Gemara has Rabbi Bar Chana, who says that Rabbi Yochanan said like Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Yochanan holds like Rabbi Shimon. So the Gemara says, okay, 1 second, that can't be, because we have a story which seems to indicate that Rabbi Yochanan held like Rabbi Yehuda, and that was the following thing. Where it says that an old man, either from Seruya or from Karuya, came and he asked Rabbi Yochanan, what's the halach about moving a portable chicken coop on Shabbos? Are you allowed to? Now, a chicken coop usually starts Shabbos muktzah because it has chickens in it. Live animals are muktzah on Shabbos. You can't shach them, can't do anything with them, but you can shoo them off the coop, and then the coop is movable. But according to Rabbi Yehuda, it should be forbidden because it started Shabbos muktzah. It should stay muktzah the whole Shabbos. Rabbi Shimon, however, should say that now that you got the chickens off, it's not muktzah anymore. But Rabbi Yochanan said that it's muktzah. So you see, he clearly holds like Rabbi Yehuda, not like Rabbi Shimon. So that would not fit with what Rabbi Bar Chana said. Someone says, no, this case was different. This was talking about a chicken coop that had a dead chick in it, and that's why it was muktzah. You can't shoo a dead chick out of the coop, and the coop is a base for the chick, which is muktzah. At this point, we're holding that the chick is muktzah because you can't do anything with it. You can't feed it to a dog. Now the Gemara says that makes sense according to Marbar Amemar, the name of Rava, who says that you can't feed a dead animal to a dog, and therefore it is muktzah. However, Mar, the son of Yosef, in the name of Rava, says that it's not muktzah. You can feed dead animals to your dogs, so it's not a problem. So therefore, even if you had a dead chick in the coop, it would still not be muktzah according to Rabbi Shimon. So how could Rabbi Yochanan say it is muktzah? It must be also like Rabbi Yehuda. He says, okay, no, I'll give you a different answer. Here, the problem was that there was a newly laid egg in the chicken coop. You can't shoo that out either. And the egg is definitely muktzah, even according to Rabbi Shimon, because it's not that it was just born. The beginning of Shabbos, not only was it functionless, it was non-existent. So that's the ultimate functionless. So Rabbi Shimon agrees that that's muktzah the whole Shabbos. The Gemara says, not so fast. Rav Nachman says that Rabbi Shimon doesn't hold of noilad. Rabbi Shimon doesn't say that something which is born on Shabbos is muktzah. So now what are you going to do? So he says, no, okay, here's what's happening. The chicken coop had an egg in it that started to develop a chick inside. Now what are you going to do with that? That is definitely muktzah because you can't eat it. You can't feed it to your dog because there's a shell. The dog won't eat an egg. And you can't shacht it because it's not a fully developed chick yet. It's still inside the egg. So that's definitely muktzah. That's why Rabbi Shimon said, that's why Rabbi Yochanan said it's muktzah, because even Rabbi Shimon would agree that it's muktzah, but really could be that he holds like Rabbi Yehuda. The Gemara now has some other reports about Amoraim, from Amoraim, as to what Rabbi Yochanan held. And where it says that Rabbi Yitzchak, son of Rabbi Yosef, came from Eretz Yisrael, and he said, Rabbi Yochanan holds like Rabbi Yehuda, but Rabbi Shua ben Levi holds like Rabbi Shimon. So Rabbi Yosef said, now we understand. Now we understand why Rabbi Bar Chana, before, when he reported what Rabbi Yochanan held, he said, they say like Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Bar Chana didn't mean that Rabbi Yochanan held like Rabbi Shimon. He meant, Rabbi Yochanan said that they, from Rabbi Shua ben Levi, who was Rabbi Yochanan's colleague, that they, meaning Rabbi Shua ben Levi holds like Rabbi Shimon, but Rabbi Yochanan himself holds like Rabbi Yehuda, as Rabbi Yitzchak, son of Rabbi Yosef, just said. So now Abaye was the Talmud of Rabbi Yosef, says, why do you have to wait to hear Rabbi Yitzchak, son of Rabbi Yosef, telling you that Rabbi Yochanan holds like Rabbi Shimon, to know that Rabbi Yochanan holds like Rabbi Yehuda, to know that you have your own proof that Rabbi Yochanan holds like Rabbi Yehuda. Meaning, we're not going to bring a proof that it should have been obvious to Rabbi Yosef that Rabbi Yochanan holds like Rabbi Yehuda. What's the proof? Proof was the following story. Rav Abba and Rav Asi came to the home of Rav Abba of Haifa on Shabbos, and a candelabra, a expensive, heavy candelabra, fell on the coat of Rav Asi, and Rav Asi was, he didn't move it off, because he held it was a muktzah. At least he didn't move it directly, because he held it was a muktzah. He could shake it off, that would be mutter even if it was muktzah. Now, says Abayi to Rav Yosef, now Rav Asi was a Talmud of Rav Yochanan. And you see that Rav Asi held that this candelabra is muktzah, even though the candles already went out. That must be because he holds like Rabbi Yehuda. Because Rabbi Shimon would say once he goes out, it's not muktzah anymore. So you see clearly that Rabbi Yochanan, and therefore Rav Asi, his Talmud, held like Rabbi Yehuda. So why do you have to wait for this report from Rabbi Yitzchak? It's what he held. You can see on your own from this case. So Rabbi Yosef said back to Abayi, that's not a proof. Candelabras are muktzah even according to Rabbi Shimon. Everybody agrees that candelabras are muktzah. We even have a machlekes between Rabbi Shimon and Reish Lakish. We have a machlekes between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish about light candelabras, because those are easily movable. But heavy candelabras, everybody agrees on muktzah, even Reb Shimon would agree, and therefore that would not be a proof to me. The Gemara says, why is it so special that heavy candelabras are muktzah? The Gemara says because it's a different type of muktzah called muktzah machmas chisar kis, where because of its value, because of its weight, what a person will do is he'll set a place for it, and it's not meant to be used at all. Nobody uses it for anything, and therefore Shabbos it's useless, Shabbos it's functionless, and therefore it's muktzah, according to all opinions.